My name is Evelyn Vance, and I spent the last decade of my life as a senior insurance risk surveyor, a job that requires me to spot the fatal flaw in a structure before it collapses. I am paid to be cold, calculated, and immune to the glossy surfaces people use to hide their rot. It is a cruel irony, then, that the most significant risk I ever failed to mitigate was the man sleeping on the left side of my bed for 7 years. Dominic Reed was a luxury real estate agent who didn't just sell houses, he sold fantasies. And apparently, I had been his most gullible customer. I stood in the center of our Echo Park penthouse, the air feeling eerily thin now that half the furniture was gone. The silence wasn't peaceful, it was a physical weight, punctuated only by the hum of the refrigerator. On the marble kitchen island sat a single piece of cream-colored stationery, the expensive kind Dominic used for his high-end listings. I picked it up, feeling the heavy grain of the paper between my fingers as I read the words he had left behind like a coward. Apologize properly for being so suffocatingly dry. Evelyn, and I will consider taking you back into my life. I let out a short, sharp laugh that echoed off the bare walls, a sound more like a predator's bark than an expression of mirth. He had walked out 3 days ago with Monica Blake, a third-rate interior designer who specialized in beige aesthetics and married men. Dominic didn't just leave, he took $200,000 from our joint retirement fund, a move he thought was a masterstroke of financial independence. He actually believed that I, the woman who tracks global market volatilities for fun, wouldn't notice a $200,000 leak in my own basement. You really think you're the lead in a rom-com, don't you? Dominic? I whispered to the empty room, tossing the note back onto the counter. I pulled my phone from my blazer pocket, the screen glowing with a series of alerts I had set up months ago to track his professional escrow accounts. I had seen the $200,000 transfer the second it hit his offshore shadow account. But I hadn't stopped it, because every dollar he stole was another nail in his legal coffin. In my world, we don't call this a betrayal, we call it a high-probability liability. And I was about to collect the premium. I swiped past the notifications and dialed a number that Dominic feared more than a market crash. Harrison. It's Evelyn Vance. I'm ready to talk about that $5 million hole in your canyons project. And I have the broker's head on a silver platter for you. I walked toward the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the Los Angeles skyline as the sun began to bleed into the horizon. Dominic thought he was the one holding the power because he had the girl and the cash. But he had forgotten who taught him how to read a contract. He wanted a proper apology for my dry nature. But what he was going to get was a clinical dissection of his entire existence. The structure is already compromised. Dominic, I muttered, my reflection in the glass looking sharper and more lethal than it had in years. I'm just here to make sure the collapse is spectacular. I remember the day Monica Blake first slithered into my living room under the guise of an interior design consultation, her eyes scanning my expensive art like a vulture measuring a carcass. Dominic stood behind her, his hand lingering just a second too long on the small of her back as he introduced her as the creative soul who would fix our supposedly stagnant home. A house needs a pulse. Evelyn, it needs a soul. Not just the sterile balance sheet you've turned it into, Monica remarked, her voice dripping with a condescension that made my skin crawl. I watched her run a manicured finger over my mahogany desk, her smirk telling me she wasn't just here for the furniture, while Dominic nodded along like a devoted disciple to her beige-colored gospel. I think the mahogany is too heavy, too restrictive for someone with Dominic's vibrant trajectory, she continued, looking me dead in the eye as she signaled her intent to strip my life bare. I didn't flinch. Instead, I leaned back and asked her exactly what a pulse costs these days, specifically in terms of a designer's commission for a married man's attention. Dominic's face flushed a deep, guilty crimson as he barked, "For God's sake, Evelyn, Stop analyzing everything like a suspicious insurance claim and just let someone with actual taste help us for once. Monica let out a soft, melodic laugh that sounded like a serrated blade. Leaning toward Dominic to whisper loudly enough for me to hear that some people are simply built to count coins, while others are born to spend them. Later that evening, I sat in a dimly lit corner of a local bistro with Sarah Jenkins, my oldest friend and a lawyer who knew exactly where all the legal bodies were buried. He took the $200,000 this morning. Sarah. Right through the shell company Monica set up in Delaware, I said, sliding a digital tablet across the table that displayed the undeniable trail of their shared greed. Sarah whistled lowly, her eyes darting through the transaction logs before she looked up with a grim, professional smile. They didn't just steal from you, Evelyn. They committed wire fraud and Totan Taisan before a divorce filing, which is a very special kind of stupid, she noted, tapping the screen on the exact moment the funds moved. Monica thinks she's the mastermind, but she's just a co-defendant who hasn't been served yet, I replied, my voice as cold and flat as a morgue slab. Sarah leaned in, her expression shifting from friend to predator as she asked if I was truly ready to let them think they had won for a few more weeks. I took a slow sip of my martini, feeling the chill settle in my chest as I told her that I wanted Dominic and Monica to feel untouchable. Because the higher they climbed on my stolen $200,000, the more bones they would break when I finally cut the rope. I don't just want my money back, Sarah. I want to watch the moment they realize that I was the only thing keeping them out of a federal courtroom, I whispered, the weight of the upcoming collapse already feeling like a victory. The oak room was thick with the scent of expensive tobacco and old money, a place where men like Harrison Ford decided the fate of skylines. Harrison sat behind a desk carved from a single piece of obsidian, his eyes tracking me with the predatory stillness of a man who didn't tolerate wasted time. I don't usually grant audiences to the ex-wives of mid-level brokers. Evelyn. So you have exactly 3 minutes before security shows you the valet, he stated, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the floorboards. I didn't sit, instead. I stepped forward and dropped a heavy, leather-bound folder onto his desk with a thud that cut through the silence. I'm not here as an ex-wife, Harrison. I'm here as the person who knows why your $5 million Canyons project is built on a foundation of lies and bad debt, I replied, watching his eyebrows twitch at the mention of the figure. He opened the folder, his gaze sharpening as he scanned the risk assessment I had spent the last 72 hours perfecting with surgical precision. Dominic Reed assured me this land was cleared of all environmental liens. So why am I looking at a $1 million liability for soil toxicity? He asked, his tone shifting from dismissive to dangerously curious. I leaned over the desk, pointing to a specific line item that Dominic had clumsily hidden under a layer of creative accounting. Because Dominic isn't selling you a development, Harrison, he's selling you a toxic dump so he can collect a commission and disappear with a designer named Monica, I explained, watching the realization of the betrayal settle into the lines of his face. Harrison closed the folder slowly, his knuckles whitening as he looked up at me with a newfound, terrifying respect. And what exactly does a woman with your specific set of skills want in exchange for saving me from a $5 million mistake? He questioned, his lips curling into a grim smile that signaled the birth of an alliance. I adjusted my blazer, my voice steady as I told him I wanted the Canyons project liquidated and Dominic's broker license burned to ash in the process. I want you to keep playing his game for now. Let him think the deal is closing. And then let me be the one to pull the rug out from under him when he's standing at the edge of the cliff, I demanded. Harrison let out a dry, appreciative chuckle, reaching for a crystal decanter to pour 2 glasses of amber liquid. You're a cold-blooded creature, Evelyn. And I think we're going to get along just fine, he remarked, sliding a glass toward me to seal our lethal pact. As I left the club, My phone buzzed in my hand with a series of frantic, arrogant texts from Dominic that felt like they belonged to a different lifetime. Just walked out of a meeting with Harrison's team. Evelyn. And the commission check is going to have so many zeros you'll regret ever calling me mediocre. One message read, followed by a photo of him and Monica toasting with champagne. I didn't reply. Simply deleted the notification while the cool night air hit my face like a tonic. He was so busy dreaming about millions that he couldn't see the $5 million guillotine I had just positioned over his neck. Enjoy the bubbles. Dominic. I whispered to the dark street. Because the hangover is going to last the rest of your life. The air inside the luxury boutique on Rodeo Drive was cloying with the scent of vanity and stolen capital. I was there picking up a tailored blazer for the gala when I spotted them near the designer handbags. Looking like a caricature of new money success. Monica was clutching a $4,500 crocodile skin clutch. Laughing while Dominic whispered something in her ear that made her preen. Oh, look. Dominic. It's the ghost of Christmas past come to haunt us in her sensible work shoes. Monica chirped. Her eyes raking over my blazer with a pity that was as fake as her filler. I didn't break my stride. Stopping just a few feet away with a calm that seemed to unnerve Dominic more than an outburst ever could. Dominic straightened his silk tie. His chest puffed out with the arrogance of a man who thought he had finally outrun his debts. Don't be bitter. Evelyn. It's a bad look for a woman of your vintage, he sneered, tossing a black titanium card onto the counter as if it were a weapon. I glanced at the card, recognizing the account number as the one linked to our $200,000 retirement fund he had drained. That's a lot of posturing for a man who is essentially spending his own funeral expenses. Dominic, I remarked, my voice cutting through the soft ambient music like a scalpel. Monica rolled her eyes and stepped closer. Her perfume hitting me like a physical assault as she told me I should use my alimony to buy some self-respect instead of stalking them. Self-respect isn't found in a handbag bought with stolen retirement funds. Monica. But I suppose you wouldn't know the difference. I replied, watching her smirk falter for a fraction of a second. Dominic stepped between us, his voice dropping to a low, threatening hiss as he warned me not to jeopardize his deal with Harrison Ford. I'm 48 hours away from a commission that will make that $200,000 look like pocket change. So stay in your lane. Evelyn. Or I'll make sure you get nothing in the settlement. He threatened. I leaned in closer, my smile as sharp and cold as a winter morning in the canyons. I'm already in my lane. Dominic. I'm just waiting for the light to turn green so I can watch you drive off the cliff. I whispered, enjoying the way his eyes darted around the room in sudden, fleeting paranoia. What they didn't see was Harrison Ford's personal assistant standing behind a rack of silk scarves just 10 feet away, recording every word of Dominic's admission of financial theft. I turned on my heel and walked toward the exit, the heavy glass doors swinging shut behind me with a satisfying, airtight seal. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a text from Harrison that simply said, "The bait is taken. And the hook is set." I looked back through the window one last time, seeing Dominic laughing and Monica tossing her hair, completely unaware that they were celebratory ghosts. Enjoy the shopping spree, I murmured to the afternoon heat. Because by Monday, you won't even be able to afford the bus fare out of this town. The ballroom of the St. Tina C. Regis was a cathedral of glass and ego, filled with the city's power players and the suffocating scent of lilies. Dominic entered like he owned the air itself, Monica draped on his arm in a gown that cost more than most people's cars. He froze when he saw me standing at the head of the VIP table, flanked by Harrison Ford and a phalanx of legal counsel. Evelyn. What the hell is this pathetic stunt? Are you stalking my clients now? Dominic hissed as he marched toward us, his face twisting into a mask of indignant rage. Harrison didn't even look up from his drink, his voice cutting through Dominic's bravado like a winter gale. Sit down. Read. Before you embarrass yourself further in front of the people who actually sign your checks. Dominic's jaw tightened as he looked at me. Then, at the empty chair Harrison had gestured toward with a dismissive flick of his wrist. I don't know what kind of bitter lies my ex-wife has fed you, Harrison, but I'm 48 hours away from closing the Canyons deal. He blustered, his hands trembling as he gripped the back of the chair. I leaned forward, the soft glow of the chandelier reflecting in my eyes as I slid a thick document across the white linen cloth. The Canyons deal died the moment I audited the soil toxicity reports you tried to bury under $1 million of fraudulent environmental offsets. Dominic, I stated, my voice echoing in the sudden, sharp silence of the table. Monica let out a shrill, nervous laugh, clutching her designer bag as she told me to stop playing pretend and go back to my spreadsheets. You really think you can stop this? I have the contracts ready to sign, Dominic roared, attracting the attention of the surrounding guests. Harrison finally looked up, his expression one of pure, unadulterated disgust as he tapped the paper I had provided. Evelyn isn't stopping the deal. Dominic, she's the one who saved me from a $5 million lawsuit while you were busy spending her $200,000 retirement fund on Rodeo Drive. Harrison revealed. The color drained from Dominic's face, leaving him a ghastly, translucent gray as he stammered that the $200,000 was a temporary loan for business expenses. I stood up slowly, my height feeling like a mountain as I looked down at the man who had asked me for an apology. We need to talk about the wire fraud and the shell company you and Monica set up to funnel Harrison's advance fees. Dominic, I said, my words falling like heavy stones into a deep well. Monica's eyes darted toward the exit, her face pale as she realized the business trajectory she had hitched her wagon to was currently in freefall. Dominic looked around the room, realizing every eye was on him, seeing the pity and the mockery he had spent his life trying to avoid. Is this what you wanted? Evelyn? To humiliate me in front of everyone? He whispered, his voice cracking with a pathetic, desperate realization. I tilted my head, my expression as cold as an ice floe in the North Atlantic. I didn't humiliate you, Dominic. I simply showed everyone the truth. And it turns out the truth is the only thing you can't afford. Monica's grip on her $4,500 clutch tightened until her knuckles turned a skeletal white, her eyes darting between Harrison's stony face and the growing circle of onlookers. I had nothing to do with the soil reports, Harrison. I was just the designer hired to make the Canyons project look presentable, she shrieked, her voice stripping away the last of her sophisticated facade. Dominic spun toward her, his eyes bloodshot and wide with the shock of a captain watching his first mate jump overboard. You were the one who suggested the offshore account in Delaware. Monica, you said Evelyn was too dull to ever audit the shell company's ledger, he roared, his desperation turning into a violent, public blame game. Monica stepped back, her heel catching on the hem of her expensive gown as she snarled that she only followed his lead because he promised her Evelyn was a spineless accountant who wouldn't fight back. He told me he had already handled you. Evelyn. He said you were grateful for the crumbs he left behind, Monica yelled, pointing a trembling finger at Dominic while looking at me with a pathetic, pleading hope for mercy. I watched them with the detached curiosity of a scientist observing a chemical reaction, the scent of their mutual destruction sweeter than the lilies on the table. Dominic grabbed her arm, his voice a ragged whisper of fury as he told her to shut her mouth before she buried them both. Don't touch me, Dominic. You're a fraud and a failure who couldn't even rob his own wife without getting caught, she spat, shoving him away with enough force to send him stumbling into a waiter. Harrison leaned back, his disgust palpable as he remarked that he had seen enough of this bottom-feeder theater for one lifetime. The $200,000 you funneled is already being tracked by the authorities. and the Delaware company is being frozen as we speak. I informed them, my voice cutting through their bickering with the finality of a gavel. Monica burst into jagged, ugly tears, sobbing that she was a victim of Dominic's manipulation and that she would tell the police everything if it meant saving herself. Dominic let out a hollow, broken laugh, looking at the woman he had traded his marriage for and seeing only a co-conspirator ready to sell him for a lighter sentence. You're going to jail. Monica! And you're going there in a dress I bought with money that doesn't belong to either of us. He sneered, his arrogance replaced by a toxic, scorched earth bitterness. The security team Harrison had signaled began to close in, their presence a silent promise that the party was over. I think it's time for the designer and the broker to find a new venue for their design thinking, Harrison said, his tone dismissing them as if they were nothing more than a bad smell in the room. I watched as they were led away, still screaming accusations at each other, their vibrant trajectory ending in the back of a black sedan under the watchful eyes of Harrison's security. I turned back to my drink, the ice clinking against the glass as the adrenaline began to fade, replaced by a cold, crystalline clarity. Dominic had wanted an apology for my dry nature, but he had finally learned that dry meant I was the only one who didn't burn when the world caught fire. I looked at the empty chairs and wondered if Dominic realized that the $200,000 he stole was the most expensive loan he would never be able to repay. The rain drummed against the pavement outside my new office, a relentless rhythm that matched the cold efficiency of the documents spread across my desk. Dominic stood by the window, his once tailored suit now hanging off his slumped frame like a discarded skin. The Luxury Real Estate Association had revoked his license that morning, a direct result of the toxic soil report I had funneled through the proper regulatory channels. You didn't just take my career, Evelyn. You took my ability to breathe in this city, he whispered, his reflection in the glass looking like a ghost of the man I had married. I didn't look up from the settlement papers, simply sliding a gold-plated pen toward him while noting that his inability to breathe was merely a side effect of his own atmospheric pollution. Sign the final decree, Dominic, and the $200,000 you stole will be officially reclassified as an advance on my marital share. Saving you from the immediate wire fraud charges Harrison is itching to file, I said, my voice as level as a horizon line. He turned toward me, his eyes bloodshot and hollow, searching my face for a flicker of the woman who used to apologize for being too busy with spreadsheets. Is this enough for you? Watching me lose the penthouse, the cars, and the girl in a single week? He asked, his hand trembling as he reached for the pen. I leaned back, my chair creaking softly in the quiet room as I told him that I felt no satisfaction in his loss, only the peace that comes with an accurately balanced ledger. Monica had already signed her confession in exchange for a suspended sentence, leaving Dominic to face the mounting $55,000 in back taxes and the $145,000 in legal fees alone. She's gone, Evelyn. She took the rest of the cash and left me with a pile of lawsuits and a designer bag she couldn't even pay for, he muttered, the irony finally sinking into his voice like a slow-acting poison. I watched him sign the paper, the scratch of the nib on the parchment sounding like the final closing of a vault door. Monica was a risk you failed to assess, Dominic, a liability you mistook for an asset because she flattered your ego, I remarked, taking the document back and checking the signature for any sign of forgery. He walked toward the door, stopping only to look back at the framed note on my wall, the one where he had demanded an apology for my suffocatingly dry nature. I guess you finally found a way to be interesting, he said with a bitter, defeated half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. I stood up and adjusted my blazer, looking at him with the same clinical detachment I used for every other failed investment. I was always interesting. Dominic, you were just too busy selling fantasies to notice the reality standing right in front of you, I replied, watching him walk out into the rain without an umbrella. The door closed with a heavy, satisfying thud, leaving me in a room where the air was finally perfectly clear. I watched the rain wash away Dominic's footsteps from the pavement below, feeling the finality of the signed decree resting on my desk like a heavy, golden seal. That afternoon was the last time the ghost of my marriage haunted my office. And within 2 fiscal quarters, I had liquidated every remaining tie to my past. I stood now in the corner suite of Vance and Ford Strategic Consulting, a space of glass and steel that reflected a city I had finally conquered on my own terms. Harrison Ford walked in, dropping a fresh contract onto the mahogany desk that once belonged to a man who thought I was too dry to lead. The Canyon site is officially cleared, Evelyn, and the new development is projected to net us $15 million by the 3rd quarter, he stated, his voice a steady anchor of professional respect that needed no hollow flattery. I picked up the pen, feeling the familiar weight of a decision that was mine and mine alone to make, while Harrison poured 2 fingers of scotch as a silent toast to our partnership. The fallout for the others had been as predictable as a bad actuarial table. A clinical collapse of 2 people who overvalued their own deceit. Monica Blake had traded her designer heels for a prison jumpsuit, serving a 5-year sentence for her role in the $200,000 wire fraud and tax evasion scheme we had meticulously documented. She had tried to reach out to me once from the correctional facility, her letter filled with desperate excuses and more creative soul nonsense. But I had shredded it without reading past the first paragraph. Dominic Reed fared even worse. Now working as a sublease manager for a crumbling apartment complex in the valley. His black titanium card replaced by a mountain of debt and a reputation that made him radioactive. You know, people still ask me how a simple insurance surveyor managed to dismantle a man like Dominic so thoroughly, Harrison remarked, leaning against the window as he watched the sunset bleed over the skyline. I signed the $15 million agreement with a flourish, the sound of the pen on the paper the only apology I would Boudier need to offer the world. I didn't dismantle him, Harrison. I simply stopped reinforcing the illusions he was building, I replied, my voice reflecting the hard-earned clarity of a woman who had finally audited her own worth. In my world, there is no such thing as a clean break. Only a redistribution of assets and the cold, hard truth of a balanced ledger that now favored me. Dominic had wanted me to be small, to be a supporting character in his mediocre drama. But he forgot that the person who counts the money eventually becomes the person who owns the bank. I walked to the window, the city lights flickering on like 1,000 data points in a successful simulation of the life I had chosen. My story didn't end with a broken heart. It ended with a strategic acquisition of my own future and the absolute destruction of those who mistook my silence for weakness. I am Evelyn Vance, and I no longer mitigate risks, I dictate them to the world. Thank you for watching my story and witnessing the moment the predator realized he was actually the prey in a game he never understood. If you believe that self-worth is the only currency that never devalues, leave a comment saying checkmate and subscribe for more tales of calculated justice. Until next time, remember that the most dangerous person in the room is the one who has already counted every single one of your mistakes. Thank you for watching till the end. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. Share it with someone who still believes kindness can't be broken, and tell me where you're watching from. Your voice keeps our stories alive.